verse 1. God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son. Now pay attention to his Son for a moment. Whom he appointed heir of all things. That's pretty big. Through whom he made all the world. I'm pretty impressed by that too. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature. And upholds all things by the word of his power. And I'm going to say, and when he had made purification of sins, as if that's not enough, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. In the Old Testament, several times people see manifestations of the Lord. What happens to them? What do they do when this happens? Yeah, face plant. The least I can come up with here is, wow. John, turn to Revelation. John in Revelation. So Hebrews is giving us this description of God. We will see here what Jesus is doing. In this scene at least. Verse 10, Revelation 1:10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. I heard behind me a loud voice like the sound of a trumpet. Verse 12, I turned to see the voice that was speaking with me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the middle of the lampstands, I saw one like a son of man clothed in a robe, reaching to the feet, and girded across his chest with a golden sash. His head and his hair were white like wool, like snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet like burnished bronze when it has been made to glow in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. Yeah, I would have too. And he placed his right hand on me, saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and the last, the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive evermore, and I have the keys of death and of Hades. The words themselves inspire us to awe. I cannot say more, other than this is the one that we are studying about. Hebrews talks about him. In Revelation, we see a picture of him. Let's open with a prayer to this one. Our God, Creator, Ruler, Sustainer, Provider of salvation, on a throne in heaven. We give you glory. We give you honor. We give you thanksgiving. We recognize you as the King. We recognize that we are the creatures, we're the citizens, we're the subjects. And we owe you all that we have and more. We come before you recognizing who you are and who we are. May we ever be humble. May we ever be dedicated to being your servants. Thank you for this opportunity to study from the book of Hebrews. Help us to understand it. Help us to love it, to apply it. And as opportunity arises, help us to help others understand it. We ask that you are with our congregation as we study this morning. May our hearts and our minds be involved. Bless those who are still coming. We look forward to this time of edification. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. Oh, one more passage real quick. John 5. John 5, verse 19. Jesus answered and was saying to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, unless it is something he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, these things the Son also does in like manner. For the Father loves the Son, and shows him all things that he himself is doing. And the Father will show him greater works than these, so that you will marvel. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son also gives life to whom he wishes. For not even the Father judges anyone, but he has given all judgment to the Son. So the Father, who has ultimate authority, delegates his authority to give life and to judge to the Son. That gives the Son power. When the Son comes in and says, I have all power, the first thing you do is say, okay, what do you want me to do? And that's verse 23. So that all will honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. Nowadays, people say, oh, there's as many people there are in the world, there are that many different ways to heaven. No, I don't think so. Jesus is the Son. He's the only one. All right. Hebrews chapter 1. Questions. What external threat were these Christians facing? Who volunteers? What external threat were these Christians facing, George?
Satan and sin.
Satan and sin. Interesting. Okay. Anybody else have, yes. Anybody else have any other worded answer? Dad?
Persecution.
That's what I was shooting for. What was the real threat? I would suggest George's answer. What did you have for that?
Unbelief.
Yeah. What was the real threat? Falling away from God. What doctrinal threat were they facing? Scan the letter. Who wants this one? John.
Hebrews, can't remember the right name for it. But the Judaizing teachers.
Yeah, returning or going to faith in Moses as opposed to faith in God. All right, so to whom was the letter written? Anybody have any different answer than that? I know I didn't ask that question in the questions, but you've read the text now. If I were to ask you, who was Hebrews written to, what would you say? Now, you'd all say Christians, right? So chapter 3, verse 1, holy brethren. Anybody mistaken as to who those people would be? I don't think so, not in this group. Now, might some non-Christians pick this up and read it? But who is he writing to? Just remember that for later. Okay, so he's writing to Christians, to whom some apostles or prophets or first evangelists had preached. Actually, I messed that up, I just realized. Chapter 2, verse 3. It was first, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mess that up. It was first spoken through the Lord, this message. It was confirmed to us by those who heard. So you have the Lord, you have his apostles, and those prophets. I don't know exactly who's in that, those who heard. Obviously, it would include the apostles, maybe a prophet, maybe a first evangelist, I don't know. And then there's this group of people. Anybody disagree with that? Yep. You won't get too profound out of me. Christians who are enduring persecution, we've already looked at that. Christians who are second-guessing the faith, that is, losing their faith in the sufficiency and authority of Jesus Christ, and subverting this faith with the law of Moses, right? That's what they are. I'm trying to go back to the law. The law of Moses is great. Okay. Christians who were very, 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 and for the sake of being thorough, very familiar with the law of Moses. Their familiarity and acceptance is assumed throughout this entire letter. This whole letter is based on knowledge of the law of Moses. Not only knowledge of it, but acceptance of it too, right? Does anybody have a guess who that might be? Okay, John said those who have been following had been following him, right? Jews. I'm guessing it was some Jew somewhere. Now there is some Gentile who could be very, very, very familiar with the law of Moses. I don't doubt it, but if I'm going to guess at something, I'm just going to guess there was a Jew. All right, assuming, and it doesn't really matter, it's somebody who's familiar with the law of Moses, okay. Assuming it is a Jew, one man writes, like their ancestors of old, the Hebrew Christians were beginning to find that the pure spiritual manna passed upon their taste. They were casting backward glances of regret towards the doomed city which they had left. I like the way he writes that. The same man writes this. In the communities of Jewish Christians, there must have been many whose faith and zeal, not kindled by hope, not supported by patience, not leavened with absolute sincerity, not maintained by a progressive sanctification, tending to wax dim and cold. They were disappointed at the delay of Christ's coming and at the frustration of all their glowing temporal hopes. They had failed to see the necessity of suffering as an element necessary for the final glorification, and if such men chanced to meet some unconverted Jew. So basically he's been saying, look, there's a Christian who is a Jew from background, that his faith is not exactly as strong as it should be, and he runs into a zealous Jew. Now, this is not inspired, but you can picture, having read Hebrews, you can picture this going on. If such men chance to meet some unconverted Jew, burning with all the patriotism of a zealot, inflated with all the arrogance of a Pharisee, they would be liable to be shaken by the appeals and arguments of such a fellow countryman. He would have asked them how they dared to emancipate themselves from a law spoken by angels. He would have reminded them of the heroic grandeur of Moses, the priestly dignity of Aaron, the splendor and significance of the temple service, of the disgrace incurred by ceremonial pollution, of the antiquity and revealed efficacy of the sacrifices, of the right to partake of the sacred offerings, above all, of the grandeur and solemnity of the great day of atonement. He would dwell much on the glorious ritual when the high priest passed into the immediate presence of God in the holiest place, or when he put on the robe of honor and was clothed with perfection of glory. When he went up to the holy altar and made and made the garment of holiness honorable. And the sons of Aaron shouted and sounded the silver trumpets and made a great noise to be heard for remembrance before the high priest. That a quote from Ecclesiastes. He would have asked them how they could bear to turn their backs on the splendid history and the splendid hopes of their nation. He would have poured scorn upon them for leaving the inspired wisdom of Moses and the venerable legislation of Sinai for the teaching of a poor crucified Nazarene, whom all the priests and rulers and rabbis had rejected. He would have contrasted the glorious deliverer who should break into pieces the nations like a potter's vessel with the despised and crucified and accursed sufferer. For had not Moses said, "Cursed of God is everyone who hangeth on a tree," whom they had been so infatuated as to accept for the promised Messiah. All right, that's not inspired. But you can picture, having read Hebrews, yeah, there's a Jew running into a Jew who had converted to Christ, but not solidly running into, and from chapter 2, verse 3, it was at the first spoken to the Lord. It was confirmed to us by those who heard. It seems to put that a little bit in the past, which means that this letter is written a little bit somewhere around AD 70. I don't know which side, but it's getting that way, or AD 70 has already occurred. Jerusalem is destroyed. During the time of AD 70, or leading up to it, you had the Pharisees and the chief priests running around trying to stir up a religious war. They would stir up a religious war based on being a Jew. And anybody who wasn't based on being a Jew. In fact, Jews who loved Romans were told to leave the city. Well, I don't imagine Christians were treated much better by the zealous Jews, right? You had the assassins going around, and what they would do is they would walk into the crowds that were mingling in Jerusalem and Alexandria, and they would walk in, and when they saw somebody that they didn't like, they would stab them. They would have these cloaks on, and underneath they'd whip out their dagger and they'd stab them, and then they would fake that they were so sad that this has happened, and they'd get away with it. Anybody who didn't like, who they didn't like, that's what would happen to them. Now, I don't know if that ever happened to Christians, but you can see this kind of persecution, this kind of zealousy going on at the time. If it was after AD 70, then about 10 years later, Vespasian ruled. And he would be persecuting Christians for being Christians. And he didn't care if you're a Jewish Christian or not. He would persecute you. I don't know exactly what's going on in the time that Hebrews is written, but things like that are going on. They're being persecuted. Remember, they're being persecuted, and what is the threat? What are they doing? They're being persecuted for their faith, and what are they doing?
Shrinking back.
I don't know if they're striking back.
No, shrinking.
Shrinking.
That's
Exactly.
what people say.
Shrinking back. So, this gives us something to do for people that we know when people's faith is being persecuted, what might they be tempted to do?
Back.
Shrink back. And so if you hear of somebody whose faith is being persecuted, what can you do? Comfort them, get on your hands and knees and pray. Lord, I know that when I've seen it before, I've read about it, when somebody's being attacked, one of the first things they do is start to question their faith. May they not do it. Okay. Anybody have a comment or a question or an observation they'd like to make, please? What was Hebrews? The author of Hebrews calls his, what we call an epistle, a letter, he calls it a word of exhortation. Technically, there's a difference, but I'm not going to make too much of it because I have a letter. What does it mean to exhort?
To encourage, to lift up, to bring forth words of wisdom.
Hebrews 13:22, I urge you, brethren, bear with this word of exhortation. By the way, how many words are there? One. So he summarizes a very lengthy sermon with just one word. Okay, yes. So he says, look, I want to lift you up. I want to lift you up. So when somebody who is being persecuted and questioning their faith, whether or not they're being persecuted, somebody who is questioning their faith, what do they need? What's the inspired example? A word of exhortation, right? Let me provide you this word of exhortation. I will say this. If you remember, and if you scanned well, if you prepared well, is the Hebrew writer optimistic or pessimistic about their future?
Optimistic.
Huh?
I say optimistic.
How do you know?
As he describes throughout the letter,
He tells them.
he tells them that
That's my point.
Yeah.
He tells them. So when somebody is doubting their faith, they need a word of exhortation, and you might want to include some positive reinforcement, right? Go ahead, John.
Well, if it was pessimistic, he wouldn't say now faith is something. He would have said now faith was.
Yes, true. And the verse before that, we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith to the persevering of the soul. Look, we're in the group that we're going to keep on keeping on. I know it, you know it. Let's go on together. Let's arm in arm, lock, and let's just keep on marching through this problem that we or you or I am having. Who wrote Hebrews?
God.
Why don't we know? Yeah, it doesn't say who wrote Hebrews.
Doesn't matter.
Chapter 2, verse 3, it doesn't seem to be one of the apostles. Now, that could be the editorial we. We just don't know. We're not going to spend all day talking about it. I remember the last time I taught this, which was something like 5 years ago, John, who is still sitting right there, said to me, who do you think wrote it? And I said, I think Paul did. Do you remember? Yeah, I don't think he did now.
Really?
Yeah, here's this little piece of paper. If you want it, there you go. It's talking about the stylistic differences between Paul and Peter. But my opinion is worthless in this matter, okay?
There are some hints about the characteristics of the person. I mean,
Yes.
Verse 1, God spoke to our fathers.
The fathers. It's not our.
Not.
No. That's okay. But there are hints. There are hints all through it, yes. He spoke to the fathers, that was probably a Jew saying that, right? Yes. So yes, there are hints all over. There are hints all over. It's chapter 2, verse 3 is a hint. You know, that's one hint. Okay. If you read things like this, the smart people will tell you that the style is radically different. Okay? Could Paul write radically differently to one person than the other? Why, he absolutely could. I have no further desire to discuss this further. Gary? Okay.
I have a question.
Everybody has something.
Yes.
It's an extremely stupid question. I've always assumed that the people receiving the letter knew who wrote it.
I think so.
This wasn't written anonymously.
Right.
It just, okay.
Right, thank
Just
you.
making sure. I hadn't thought about it. But
Yeah. Where were the recipients of Hebrews? Don't know, because it doesn't say, right? I will say this, the more I read of this book, the more I read that there are many, many, many very, very obvious parallels to a man named Philo, who was a Jewish philosopher who tried to reconcile philosophy with the law of Moses, okay? And so he was saying, look, the law of Moses is like philosophy. And so when he did that, he started to incorporate some things in philosophy, and he started to go a little wrong, and all the Jews knew it. And so the theory is this guy wrote this to counter Philo. We don't know. We don't know. It may be true. Philo was in Alexandria. Where is, or was, Alexandria? Egypt. Who was there? Lots of people, but especially a large body of Jews. Yes, Mark. That's where the Septuagint was translated, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Lee's outline of Hebrews. It's a very nice outline. Did any of you outline Hebrews? That's a little bit of work for you. I'll tell you this. I have studied Hebrews more than once, and I have always been there were trouble spots. I mean, there were really trouble spots for me, and I was very insecure about how I perceived them to be. I am still insecure, but I am less insecure than I was before. Hebrews, to me, is more difficult than Romans, for example. Maybe for you it's the other way around. I will note this. Little theology, little doctrine, and then practical application. Persevere in Christ. Theology, practical application. Persevere in Christ. Theology or doctrine, persevere in Christ. Doctrine, persevere in Christ. So it's a very practical letter. As I said in my email, and the schedule is back there, if we cover 17 verses a class, it'll take us 18 classes, I think. That was the number to get through it, or 19 classes, something like that. Comments or questions? I said, any observations or applications so far, when I'd only asked you about the outline? I'll tell you that I get a lot when I just scan something. It might not be good, but I get a lot, right? So maybe you got something. Before we get into this text, any comment or yes? Never give up. Anybody disagree with that one? Right? That's his message. Don't give up, don't give up, don't give up, right? All this Hebrews 11, all these people of faith, what's his point? Don't give up. We're not of those who shrink backwards. We're not of those who give up. Anytime somebody else makes a point that I don't have to, that'll give something. All right, so chapter 1, let's see. Let's get to the main point of this text. Question number 5. What is the main point of chapter 1? What is the main point of chapter 1? Anybody?
God's Son is better than the law of Moses.
God's Son is better than the law of Moses. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay, God's Son is, I have written down God's Son is greater than angels, or Jesus is greater than angels, is exactly what I wrote. And so what? There's the so, and then there's the so what, right? Chapter 1, so, God, Jesus is greater than angels. Well, so what? Chapter 2, pay attention. We must pay much closer attention. Okay. Verse 1. God, in this 2 verses, we're going to see 3 things that are contrasted with each other. There's the who, there's the when, and then there's the how. Okay, so God. He spoke long ago. So there's when. To the prophets, there's who. To the fathers, there's who. In the prophets, there's how. And also in many portions and in many ways. Now we open up our Old Testament, we see that it's many metered out ways. Like Jeremiah, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. And also with Jeremiah, go act out this prophecy, and then go speak this prophecy. Many portions, many ways. In these last days, now we have when again. He has spoken to us, there's who again. And in his Son, there's how again. All right. You remember the parable of the vineyard? The man has a property, he creates a vineyard, then he rents it out. And then when it's harvest time, he sends his servants, slaves, whichever, to go and get. What do they do to the slaves, servants? Yeah, they beat them, they kill them. And he sends more, they beat them and kill them. And then the owner says what? I'll send my son. What's the reasoning there?
More authority.
The son is better. Right here. I spoke in the prophets, they were just servants of mine. Now I'm speaking in my Son. The assertion that his Son is greater begins with that contrast. Now we're going to see 6 things. What happened to him? Verse 2. In these last days he has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things. That's pretty impressive. Then we see what he did, through whom he also made the world. Again, that's pretty impressive. Raphael comes up to me recently with these little Duplos. He puts them all together and he comes up to me and says, "Look, Dad." I say, "Wow, that's great." God made the world. Through whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the world. Number 3, what he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature. Stop there for a second. Do you remember in Exodus, when they finish building the temple, what happens? The glory of the Lord. In Leviticus chapter 9, when they finish ordaining the priests, you remember what happens? The glory of the Lord appears to them, and they all do what? You remember?
Bow down.
They all bow down. Again, a face plant. The Lord has this manifestation of his glory. The glory of, it's a bright burning fire. And they say the glory of the Lord. There's the Lord, and then there's his glory. Well, now it's his Son who is the glory that appears. Remember, John 1 talks about the same thing. Also, my version, the New American Standard, says he is the exact representation of his nature. The word there, if you could read those original little characters, is character. He is the character of his nature. Your version says he is the stamp of what? Stamp of his nature. He's the stamp, because that's the word that's used for stamp. What is a stamp? A stamp is a little thing that's been what? In the old days, the stamp was cut. That's the word. It's cut, exactly. So that when you take the stamp and you impress it into the wax, you remove the stamp, and guess what's there? The exact representation of what was on there, right? Well, here, God is the substance. There's actually a God out there. But who can see God? We can't see God, but we know He's there. Well, Jesus was the exact character of the nature of God. More about this in a minute. Verse 3, it's what He is doing still. He upholds all things by the word of His power. Verse 3, what He did do, He made purification of sins. And verse 3, what He's still doing, sitting down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. Does anybody I know what I mean when I say, and he drops the microphone? The idea, it's to emphasize. I've got this thing to say, and I say it, and then I drop the microphone, and it goes thunk, and it emphasizes what I just said. This is what God is doing with His Son. Look at all He's done. He's the Son. Now, verse 4, the construction is odd. Having become as much better than angels, as He inherited a more excellent name than they. Name, Jesus, Christ, Son, or what? What does name sometimes stand for? Christ the Messiah. Name sometimes stands for what? The nature of the one, right? I don't know. I don't know if He's talking about Son, because that's what He's talking about. I don't know if He's talking about Jesus, Christ, Messiah, or just look at His nature. Don't miss the point. There's a whole bunch of stuff through here that we won't understand exactly, but we can always get the point. The point is, He inherited a more excellent name than they, angels. Whatever that name is, it's better than them. Yes, having become as much better than the angels. Sometimes you apply the wrong name to somebody. No, he doesn't fit that name. In this case, He's got the best name, and He fits it. And He is greater than the angels. Comments or questions? Yes.
In Exodus 33, when Moses asked God, I want to see you. He says, no, you can't see my face, but I will proclaim my name to you. So he already knew his name.
Right.
But there's something more to the name than just
Yeah.
name.
My character.
Right. And then he goes on to say, merciful, gracious, etc.
Loving, kind, yes. Yeah, exactly. That seems, I would suggest that's what He's talking about here. You can suggest He's talking about the name Son, or the title Son, or the name Christ, whatever you want to do. Don't miss the point. The point is, whatever the angels have, He's got it. He's got more. He's got better. Now, why suddenly, we're entering the middle of a conversation here, aren't we? Right? He's better than the angels. Yeah. Why are we talking about this? Again, assuming Gary.
Yeah, because it just said He made everything. So with that automatically conscience that everything is made.
Yeah, but He's also better than dirt. Why doesn't He say He's better than dirt? They're obviously arguing He's better. There's an argument somewhere that the angel is better than Jesus. Who's making that argument? I don't know, but let me throw this out there. In Acts 7:53, Stephen says that the law was ordained by angels. Galatians 3:19, the law was ordained through angels. Hebrews chapter 2, the word spoken through angels. We read that. Now, if an angel comes, and by the way, did they see the manifestation of the angel at Mount Sinai? Yes, they see these angels. They attach the angel with the law. And when you see those who we know, some of them, who saw the manifestation of the angel, what did they do? They did their face planting. What does the angel say? Stand up. I'm just a servant. But the point is, that's what they thought to do. And these are good men, inspired men. I fell at His feet to worship Him. Talks about an angel. And in Colossians chapter, so if an inspired good man is going to do it, well, Colossians 2:18, talking about Judaizing teachers, let no one keep defrauding you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of angels. It's going on there. Now that's the background that we know of. I assume it's just plug and play right here. Somebody's arguing about angels. I assume it's the Jews. It makes sense. Somebody had
To whatever extent, though, it has to be a perversion of the law. Even though some of this is the case, He's not arguing against legitimate points of the old law. He's arguing against something that they have created as a Jewish tradition only, right?
Yes. Excellent point. He's arguing not against the law. He's arguing against did you say perversion?
I did, yeah.
Perversion of the law. Of course, that's the only perversion there has ever been. So, what does he do? I asked the question, how does he approach refuting, correcting, encouraging against this perversion? How does he do it?
Jesus is better than the angels, so that makes it automatically, whatever he speaks, better than what the angel has spoken.
Yes. How does he do it? The Word. The Word. Quote after quote after quote after quote after quote after quote. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm being tempted. I'm slipping. I might not even know it, but let's say I do. I'm slipping into believing this thing that's a slightly off. What do? Eric, sit down. Over and over and over again until he gets it. And sometimes they don't get it, do they? And you know, I can be stubborn also, right? So we need to be careful. Okay, so here are the argumentation or the illustration. It depends on the perspective of the recipient or the perspective of the author, what he's trying to do. Proof after proof after proof. So there will be 6 different, I'll call them illustrations here for now. Verse 5, the first part of it. Now these are all quotes from the Old Testament. You go look at Psalm this, Psalm that, 2 Samuel that. Okay, you go look that up. The point is, it's from the Old Testament. For to which of the angels did he ever say? Now, this doesn't come through in our English, but there's a lot of emphasis in here. First of all, the word son is first. Son! Son! Not angel. Son is first. And then you are includes another you. Son. You are. You are son. Go find any angel, find one, and find who he said, you are my son. No, he never did it. And today, I have begotten you, son. There's one illustration. And I, again, I'm just going to read this as though the emphasis is there. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son. When that he in there, in the original, is pointing right at, it's got its finger pointed right at him. He is going to be my son. Now, go find an angel, any angel, anywhere, and get that. The answer is no. So there's one illustration or proof, or actually 2. Verse 6, and when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, and let some of the angels of, no, all of the angels of God worship him. Yes, Michael, the archangel, Gabriel. I mean, they're big guys. Top dog. Yeah, even they worship this son. 7 through 9. And of the angels, he says, who makes his angels winds and his ministers a fire of flame. I have no idea for sure what he makes his angels winds means, and they're a flame of fire. We can argue that all day. Don't miss the point. They are ministers. There's the contrast. And actually the contrast again is brought out. It's not so well here. And basically the idea is this. On the one hand, he makes angels ministers. On the other hand, of the Son, he says, your throne. Well, that's enough. So they're servants and he's a king. And then look what it says. Oh God. Your throne, O God. He's talking to the Son. Your Son, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. And the righteous scepter is in the scepter of his kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with oil of gladness above your companions. That word is the same word that's in Hebrews chapter 2, where Jesus was like his brethren, made like his brethren in the flesh, well, his companions. Verse 10 through 12, a 5th illustration. And you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth. The heavens are the works of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. You see, the angels or the creation are going to burn up. Not the angels necessarily. Depends on which angels, I suppose. But he's saying, look, they will remain. You will remain. Verse 11, they will perish, you will remain. They will all become old like a garment, like a mantle. You will roll them up like a garment. They will also be changed, but you are the same, and your years will not come to an end. Verse 13, but to which of the angels has he ever said, find one? That's the point. That word is emphatic. Find one. You can't. Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Are they not all ministering spirits sent out to render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation? End of arguments or illustrations. Yes.
That's where it said, in your studies, have you noticed, have any of the philosophers or anybody talk about a specific tradition or version of the scriptures where they make angels better than Jesus? I mean, I know that that's...
Yes, the book of Enoch mentions it, and there are later traditions that refer to earlier traditions. The later traditions are about 1000 AD, which refer to earlier traditions which come from anywhere earlier, that the Messiah, they argue 1,000 years later that the Messiah will be greater than Abraham, Moses, and I want to say the archangel. I forget which it is. It's an angel specific. So there were, and then again Colossians chapter 2 refers to their perversion. This, but there's not much that I know of more than that.
Well, there's a tradition now. There's lots of tradition now that involves the worship of angels or saints or putting somebody. I mean, they insert a lot of tradition in that
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, this is one symptom of a general problem, and that is take out Jesus and put in anything. In this case, it's his word. It's angels. We've taken out Jesus, and right here we're putting in an angel, which is actually part of a bigger argument, isn't it? Take out the angel and put in the law of Moses. Okay, and so you can take out whatever it is, in the Catholic tradition, the Mormon tradition, the Islamist tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the atheist tradition. It doesn't matter what it is. It's take out Jesus and put in. And in this way, by the way, problem solving is like that. Look, I understand the general problem here. Now I just have to work out the specifics, how to understand them and help other people see them at the same time, right? Comment or question here? Somebody else? I'd say he's rather thorough. Some might see this as too much. It's, I guess it's not too much because God did it.
You have to be thorough in order to refute any argument.
You have to be thorough because this is not a game. That's the more you understand, this is not a game. And you might hurt people's feelings now, but you're trying to save their souls. This is not a game. So I will lay it on thick. I love what Paul says. I like it for the way I think. Though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. The weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. And how do I do that? I throw out one verse. Is one verse enough? I would say yes, it is. It's the Word of God, right? But he lays it on thick, 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 thick. Jeremiah calls the Word of God, do you remember what? Yes, what's the context? Let the false prophets raise up their, I'm mixing 2 Corinthians with Jeremiah 20. Let the false prophets, that's Jeremiah 25, 2 Corinthians, raise up their lofty idea. Go ahead, let them speak. Let them. And then put my word over here. And guess what those who are truly searching for truth will know? They'll be able to identify it. Because his word is like a hammer. And it smashes the false doctrine, right? So that's, I'm not saying, I read some very, very, very interesting stylistic differences between the Paul that we know and whoever wrote Hebrews, even if it was Paul himself. And the general idea is the author of Hebrews goes out of his way to be gentle. Paul does not. That's so because Paul's dealing with people who are stubborn. They're stubborn. They refuse to accept me. The author of Hebrews is taking another approach, right? So we have to have the wisdom. A lot of you have signed up for Jerry Falk's meeting, gospel meeting, one lesson to be the importance of tact. Yeah, that's what we're talking about here, how to be tactful. I need to stop. Anybody comment or question? George?
The big paragraph that you had up earlier, kind of drawing a picture of
Uh-huh.
an extremely zealous Jew talking about the grandeur of the old law, with perhaps a weak or recently converted Christian who had practiced Judaism. So this opening section here obviously refers a lot to the old law. It's quoting the old law, and there is a point upon which there's commonality. Whoever is writing this, if you picture that relationship between that zealous Jew and that weak Christian, the weak Christian can respond in this way: look, I agree, the old law said a lot of great stuff. I respect the old law, and here's what the old law says about the Messiah. It begins on a basis of a common understanding of an appreciation for what that was.
Yes, and that is the assumption of the author. The author assumes that this Christian he's writing to has some appreciation for the text. Either the only appreciation is the authority of the text, in which case he shows them, this passage says this, now you need to believe it. Or the recipient has an appreciation for the authority and also knows what it is and just needs to be reminded. Hey, go back here, look at this again. Oh yeah, thank you. I was slipping. Thank you for that little help. But a commonality, doesn't matter. Yeah, once you throw away an appreciation for the authority of the scripture, then there's not much you can do. We started 5 minutes late, but I'm still ending at the time we normally would. That makes me on time, Jonathan. So, I will say this. Now, we do have to cover some of chapter 2. I don't plan on saying too much more from chapter 1. I have some applications from chapter 1. But if you're looking for deep, it'll take more than 18 classes. Comments or questions? Thank you for your work. We'll break till 5 after.